Hello, welcome to lesson number 4 in our series on Judaism, beliefs and teachings. This lesson is about Shekinah, the divine presence. Our objectives today are to understand this concept of Shekinah and to understand the Jewish belief that God is still active in the world and that they can experience his presence. Let's look now to our need to know. Now today you need to know that Jews believe that God is active in the world and this involvement is known as Shekinah. How, if at all, can God be experienced today? You may have an opinion on this at the moment. You might want to pause the video and have a good think about that. What do you think? Do you think God can be experienced in the world today or not? 2 lessons ago, we looked at this idea of God being the creator and the sustainer. And if you remember, Jews prayed daily that God's creation would continue, and they believe that God continues to sustain the world every day by his will. And they believe that God is involved and active in the world and that his presence can be experienced. And this is known as Shekinah, the divine presence. We can see different examples of Shekinah throughout the Tanakh. You can see the pictures here. Firstly, there's the classic story of Moses at the burning bush. I don't know if you know the story. The voice comes from the bush, take off your feet. Take off your shoes. You're standing on holy ground. Moses talks to God at the bush. Then that would be an example of God's presence on earth. Tangible, manifest presence, the Shekinah. We can see then as well that when Moses again goes to the tabernacle, and the tabernacle is built, and when the Jews are traveling through the wilderness, that God appears to them in a pillar of fire and a pillar of smoke to guide them on their way. Another example of the Shekinah there. And then when Solomon's temple is built as well, the presence of God enters the temple. And the priests are there and they see this presence of God as a cloud. I've got a great quote here from 1 Kings from the Tanakh. When the priests withdrew from the holy place, the cloud filled the temple of the Lord, and the priests could not perform their service because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled his temple. Now, although the word Shekinah is not in the Tanakh, you wouldn't find that word in there, the concept is in there. We've just seen different examples of that, like Moses at the burning bush. But the word does appear in the Talmud. And Maimonides, our favorite Jewish scholar, he described Shekinah as a light, which acts as a connection between God and the world. Interestingly, the word Shekinah is a feminine word. This has led to some Jews thinking that Shekinah is the female presence of God, the feminine aspect of God. And in Kabbalah, in Kabbalistic teaching, which is a branch of Judaism, Shekinah is seen as the supernatural mother, if you will. And it's the aspect of God that rescued the Jews from Egypt and led them to the promised land. They see this as kind of a mother type of God. So let's pause the video there, have a go at these questions, check your understanding, and then we'll look at some answers in a minute. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to have a go at those questions. Let's look at some answers now. So number 1, Shekinah in its simplest definition is simply the divine presence of God. Different examples of the Shekinah in the Tanakh might be Moses at the burning bush, the Jews being led through the wilderness by the pillar of fire and smoke, God's presence appearing in the tabernacle, or God's presence in the temple. In Kabbalah, it says that they teach that the Shekinah is the feminine aspect of God, and they say that it's kind of the mother, supernatural mother part of God that led the Jews out of slavery and towards the promised land. Maimonides, he said that the Shekinah is the light that God uses to draw the world to him. So it's like a tool that God uses to, that's not an appropriate word really at all, but it's a way of bringing people to him through his presence. Now, the extension is your opinion, and I know we haven't yet looked at the Tanakh and the Talmud in these lessons, but some Jews would say just because it's not mentioned in the Tanakh doesn't mean that we shouldn't believe in it. You can see examples of the Shekinah in the Tanakh, which we've already spoken about, and of course it is mentioned in the Talmud, which for most Jews would say that the Talmud and the Tanakh have equal weighting, and both should be studied to fully understand the teachings of Judaism and to fully understand God. What about today? Now, we've looked at examples from the Tanakh, which is obviously thousands of years ago. People like Moses, etc., experiencing the Shekinah. But what about today? Can Jews experience the Shekinah today? Well, yes, they can. Most Jews would say they experience the Shekinah in 3 different ways today. One is through study of the Torah, of the Talmud, through discussions, etc. And they might experience God's presence through that. Others might be through worship, when they go down to the synagogue and they see the Nir Tamid and they're reminded that God's presence is with them all the time. Others would say through prayer, through their daily prayers, they're connecting to God and they're experiencing His divine presence. And if you look at the picture in the background here, you can see a Jew in Jerusalem at the Western Wall. And some Jews think that because this is the last part of the temple still standing, the Shekinah presence is present in that wall. And you can see how close this Jewish man is getting to that wall to hopefully experience the Shekinah presence, the divine presence of God. A couple more questions there. Number 5, how can Jews experience Shekinah today? And why do you think things like fire, cloud, and bright lights are often used to describe God's presence? That's your opinion for number 6. Okay, so a couple of answers there. Obviously, number 6 is your opinion, so I won't go into that one. But number 5, how can they experience Shekinah today? Well, some Jews would say they can experience it through study, through worship, through prayer, or by visiting the Western Wall in Jerusalem. That brings us to the end of this lesson, all about the Shekinah. I need to know, just to revisit that, you need to know that God is active in the world today and that His involvement is known as Shekinah. Now, do you understand that sentence, and could you explain that to someone else? Thanks for joining us today. See you next time.